This is supposed to be fun, Derek. Welcome back to the Steelers Now pregame scout. 10 days removed from an extremely disappointing loss for the Steelers to the Patriots at home, and they play on Saturday this week, 4:30 special on NFL Network as they take on the Colts. Steelers, Colts, seemingly everyone else in the AFC is tied at 7-6. But after a merciful weekend off last weekend, we get back to it, and still 4 games left for Pittsburgh, but they're now in a complete toss-up, you could say, for the final 2 wild card spots. There are actually 6 teams, to be exact, tied at 7-6. The Steelers actually hold the tiebreak over all of them right now, but I think playoff odds can't be any higher than 50% at this point. So, again, Derrick Bell joins me, Steelers Now analyst. The last 2 games as miserable as you can get. Derek, I tried to get you to say last week that the loss to the Cardinals was the worst of the Tomlin era, but might the Patriots' loss have actually been even further down?
Man, that was really tough to watch.
Yeah.
Just similar theme too, right? Like just they just come out so flat. I mean, it literally looked like they were gonna get boat raced. And they ended up, climbing back in the game in the second half. But I will be honest with you. Not much surprises me these days with like how the Steelers play. But I was surprised to see Bailey Zappi throw 3 touchdowns in the first, 22 minutes of the game or something like that. It just the defense just never really just never got off the bus until the second half. And then the offense, we've talked at length about just their various struggles throughout the season, and they just looked completely dysfunctional.
Yeah, I feel like I think your instincts are the same as mine here. We're expecting a subpar offensive performance, but the defense to go out there against the Pats, and not to belabor the point, but to give up a touchdown drive to a team that had just been shut out on the first possession of the game. The Patriots had not scored an opening possession touchdown all season long. And of course, they do it coming out of the tunnel on Thursday Night Football. So, in terms of that defense, you said again, just like the Cardinals did the previous week, the Patriots attacked the so-called spine of the Steelers' D, the middle of the field. They were able to get guys open. I realize depth isn't what it should be or what it could be right now because of injuries, but there's also plenty of underperformance. So I guess my first question to you is the book out on the Steelers defense, and what can they do to counter what I'm assuming is going to be another middle of the field focus coming up from the Colts here?
Yeah, I mean, the NFL, man, I say this all the time, but I think the NFL can be really cruel, just in terms of if you show a weakness, good offensive coordinators or offensive coordinators that are doing their film study, they will attack it until you stop it. And I think that's kind of where the Steelers are at right now. The Cardinals kind of laid the blueprint a little bit, started attacking some backups in the middle of the field, and then you saw it for New England, right? Like they went right after it. The first drive of the game, they run a little pick play, and then Walker kind of goes underneath the pick instead of bubbling over, and Zappi ends up hitting the flat route, easy touchdown. And then they came right back after him. Later, just a drive or two later, to Hunter Henry, they game matched up one on the backside post, wide open in the middle of the field. Walker slips a little bit, so it's a very real problem, kind of like what we talked about last week. Anytime you get down to your fourth, fifth, sixth option at any position, the NFL just does not have depth like that. The starters and the guys that are playing every Sunday are too good. But it gets really tough to game plan around. So, it's one of two things. You can either adjust the way that you are, playing your coverages, especially on passing downs where you know what you're gonna get. So you can go to like more zone, things like that. But that does, obviously there's disadvantages to that as well. Or you can change up the personnel. I think if you look at the depth chart this week and some of the different things, Blake Martinez is now listed as a co-starter. We'll have to see what that means in terms of, what's the distribution of labor between him, Walker, Roberts, those guys. But really, it just comes down to they're going to need somebody to step up in that role because, you can play. You're going to have a linebacker on the field, even on third downs, and until they prove that they can stop it, that's going to be something that defense or opposing offenses continue to attack.
Part of me feels like this was bound to happen, a backslide for the defense because it was so reliant on splash plays and turnovers, and they even got an interception last week against the Patriots, but still didn't help them put themselves over the top when it comes to either creating points straight from the defense or setting up a short field. So even that wasn't enough. uh, for you, do you feel the same way that maybe this team was outperforming its baseline just because they were getting some turnovers, like I said, or some huge tackles for loss, some things that upset the balance when you talk about field position, especially?
Yeah, I think really over the first part of the season, I definitely thought that the splash plays, the turnovers were kind of masking some of the other issues that they have on defense. And I've said all season long, this is a good but not great defense.
Hmm.
They are a good unit. They do some things well, but they're not a dominant unit like what Cleveland's been this year, or even what the Jets have been per se. But I do think that this is a good defense. My only thing is with discussing that side of the ball and expectations over there, like you said, we expect the offense to struggle just based on what we've seen in recent years. The expectations on that side of the ball are just higher because if you look at it, granted, I do not think that they played well against the Pats. You cannot let Bailey Zappi come into your house, throw 3 touchdowns in the first 22 minutes. But having said that, like if you look at the overall performance and totality, they allowed 21 points. 21 points is the league average for points allowed this year in a game.
Hmm.
So the way that the Steelers have to play, they are 1-9 over the past 2 seasons when they allow more than 20 points. It's
Wow.
just the margin for error is just so thin for that side of the ball, to where you can basically say like if this defense does not play well, and they didn't against the Pats on Thursday Night Football, if they don't play well, they're not going to win the game. And the one win that they had was against the Browns, where the defense scored multiple times. So if they do not play well, they're just not. This team is just not built to win the football game. So there's a lot of pressure over there, and I totally get it. There's a lot of guys that are making a ton of money. End up losing both the edge rushers. Thankfully, it looks like those guys are going to be back for the Colts game. But if the Steelers really want to make some noise, want to make the playoffs over the next month, this defense is going to have to be pretty much dang near dominant, and that's just the reality of where we're at.
I neglected to mention also the Steelers basically got two turnovers, pardon me, against the Patriots because they got the blocked field goal too or they blocked a punt, pardon me, from
Yep.
Killebrew in the fourth quarter that really made things interesting in the end, but ultimately New England pulls it out. So after back-to-back losses to two-win teams, the offense tries to pick itself up and go after it again here. Mitch Trubisky, I guess he had a couple of moments in his return to game action, Derek, but honestly, overall, a disappointing night for him. We talked in the previous show about risk versus reward when it comes to Trubisky, but there really was no reward, was there? I was expecting a little more downfield. I guess ironically, the game ends for all intents and purposes on a downfield throw, but on 4th and 2 when probably could have been a different look there for Mitch trying to find somebody underneath for the first down. Then you maybe try to go for the splash, but Trubisky, the interception when he's trying to hit Fryermuth in the first half, that one just an obvious, even for a novice like me, it's an obvious you can't throw that off his back foot, not square to the throw, trying to squeeze it between 2 and 3 guys. So when I can notice that, I know it's pretty bad. But in terms of what he does, is he even the right fit for what the Steelers are trying to do right now? Or is it crazy to say Mason Rudolph might be a better option when Kenny Pickett is out?
Yeah, I mean, it was a pretty disastrous game. I feel like really from the jump because, like I said, you get down 21 nothing. This offense, this team in general, is not built to win that way. It's the truth. Um, and you mentioned the interception, the Trubisky. That entire play is just completely cursed. I mean, there was so much wrong with that play. You mentioned just trying to make a play in that situation that it's okay to just punt the football on third down. Like you have like a lot of quarterbacks that are, over aggressive don't really understand that. But there is a time and a place where a punt is okay. Like you don't want to make a bad play worse. And really what happened on the play is the Patriots, they did a lot of really unique stuff pre-snap to disguise what they were doing. And Mitch ends up sliding the protection the wrong way. Well, they bring a simulated pressure the other way, so they get a free runner and they're running 4 verticals, but they put 2 rushers on the back. So Jalen Warren can't get out of the backfield. So there's no check down. And they've got
Mm.
4 verticals down the field. So it's like there are no options except down the field. And then, of course, I'm sure that people caught on to this after Merrill Hodge broke this down, I think on the radio yesterday. But when I was watching the film, like it's pretty obvious Freiermuth just stops on the route. So that's another component to this that's just really ugly to watch. Like he just stops. Now that play probably doesn't get completed. It's going to be a contested catch situation either way. But it's just like one of those things where it's like you have to try to get Mitch to understand that there is a line between being aggressive and being reckless. And just throughout his career, that's just something that he has not been able to like kind of toe very successfully. And that's kind of what has gotten him into a career backup role now.
Is it more a mental thing for him, or is there something about he's just not very fundamentally sound as a quarterback? I guess I'm asking, can it be fixable through just some physical alterations to what he's doing? Maybe not in the middle of the season, but for his sake going forward in the offseason.
Yeah, I mean, look, man, when you got a quarterback that's in their late 20s, they pretty much are what they are. I mean, there are very rare instances where you're going to get a 28, 29-year-old quarterback, and they're just all of a sudden going to become something that they're not. And that's the other thing that's kind of frustrating about where the NFL is at right now. Not just for the Steelers, but the Colts playing a backup quarterback this week with Gardner Minshew. You just look around the NFL. I mean, we got tons of backup quarterbacks that are going to start this weekend. It's just tough because we don't have 32 qualified starting quarterbacks in the league. It's just the honest truth. The quarterback play in general is down, and that's really when everybody's healthy. So when you start shuffling in some of these backups, and granted, some of those guys have had flashes in the pan, but a good example of that is like Josh Dobbs had a couple flashes in the pan this year, and then a couple weeks later he's benched. It just the NFL is a cruel world, and like if you're not there, we just don't have that many talented passers. And Mitch, he has, some athleticism. His arm is completely fine. He will make some plays with his aggressiveness. A good example of that was the touchdown to Deontay Johnson. Basically, New England's bringing cover zero, so they're all out blitz. And one of the best ways to beat cover zero is throw the ball over their head. And they did that, completed a big play for a score. But, this Mitch to me against the Patriots just never really looked comfortable. His eyes were all over the place, just really frenetic and antsy in the pocket. That was against a team like the Patriots that doesn't necessarily boast, the most effective pass rush. So that's definitely concerning, moving forward as he, is going to hopefully right the ship until Pickett kind of gets back.
And what are your feelings on Rudolph, what you've seen over the years, and with what the Steelers are trying to do now? Is he a better fit, same fit, worse fit?
Yeah, I mean, for people that probably follow me on Twitter, like back in the day, I was not a Mason believer, if you will. I was gonna say fan, but I root for these guys, even if I don't necessarily
Mhm.
think that they're the answer. But with Mason, I think the big difference between the two quarterbacks is I think Mason's a bit more consistent, just down to down, and you know what you're gonna get. You're not probably gonna get as many highs, but you're also not gonna get as many lows.
Mhm.
And I think that there's probably an argument to be made that his consistency and just his steadiness is probably a little bit more beneficial to a team like this, where you're trying to win with the run game, you're trying to win with a good defense. You just don't need him to turn the ball over. But having said that, is there a huge difference in terms of how many points the Steelers are going to put up with Rudolph? Probably not. I don't think so. It's probably more about just like reducing the negative plays, but there's advantages to aggressiveness. There's disadvantages to it. I do think that if Mitch comes out, let's just say Saturday, he comes out and he just really struggles against the Colts. I do think there is a world where Mason could get a shot. Maybe it's in game. Maybe it's the following week, assuming that Pickett's not ready till the finale. I think that there is, a way that could happen considering, Tomlin, it seemed like he was really open to the idea of maybe starting Rudolph last year against the Panthers when Pickett missed. For some of these reasons that we're talking about right now, just Trubisky not taking care of the football.
Mhm. And it reminded me that of all of Kenny Pickett's ails this season and all of his,
He has taken care of the football.
yeah, all of his steps back that he's taken seemingly, or stagnation, he doesn't throw interceptions, and just very limited mistakes like what we saw from Trubisky a couple of times against the Pats. So let's move on to the Colts this week. Like I said, 4:30 Saturday, don't miss it on NFL Network. The Steelers try to stay above 500 and stay ahead of the Colts in the AFC wildcard tussle, and they get a chance here to go against a team that, on the defensive side, at least has a familiar face running things. Gus Bradley, his defense more of a cover three heavy approach. And you noted on Steelers Now Plus this week, everyone check it out, steelersnow.com, and find the SN Plus tab at the top. Scroll on down to Derek's look, his film room study of how the Steelers struggled against the Pats cover three and what they might do, some basic remedies for trying to attack a defensive scheme like that. So, when you look back at the Steelers' previous struggles against cover three, do you think it has been more execution on the player side, or has it been merely more poor play design?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's always a bit of both, right? Like when your offense is this
Mhm.
anemic, I do think it's a bit of both. But you mentioned Gus Bradley from the Seahawks, kind of Legion of Boom coaching tree with Pete Carroll, and he's really kept that kind of same approach, even as most of the league has kind of shifted away. I mean, cover three is still the most popular defense in the NFL, but most of the league has shifted away from that just as an over reliance, but to Bradley's credit, man, he's made things work over there on that side of the ball. They're about middle of the pack in most defensive metrics. They struggle against the run. Um, one of the problems with cover three, and that's the reason that some of the NFL teams have kind of shifted towards like more too high instead of using a center fielder, is just I think the Seahawks defense kind of tricked people into thinking that this is a easy defense to run, and that's because they had so many generational talents everywhere. You got Richard Sherman on the outside. You've got Earl Thomas, who had the capability of covering the entire field with his range. You have Bobby Wagner, who in his prime was a very good coverage linebacker. And then, equally important, they had some really good dudes rushing the passer. Michael Bennett, Cliff Averill, those guys could really get after you up front to where they didn't need to blitz. And it's funny to watch Bradley's defense because there are so many similarities between just how he calls the game. The Colts just on defense right now, they are the number one team in the league in terms of zone coverage. They only play man coverage on 10% of their snaps. Bradley only blitzes about 17% of the time. That's 30th in the NFL. You pretty much know what you're going to get with them, and it's very predictable. But one thing that I'll say is Bradley is a very good coach in terms of coaching the details. He doesn't blitz a lot, but when he does blitz, they're pretty effective. So it's going to be a good test. I think for Trubisky, had a rough performance last week against cover three, really in general. But that's something that I think Bradley is going to see on film, and they're going to be dialed into that. If you just look at Mitch last week, he had 10 dropbacks against cover three coverage against the Pats. Those netted 24 yards. That's not good. So
What I liked is you noted it in a few spots, just some general concepts, some route combinations. Could you flesh that out more for people watching and listening right now? Maybe tease your piece if they didn't get a chance to look at it, because I found it pretty interesting. Even if you're not talking about specific plays per se, you're talking about, say, high-lowing a defender, that sort of thing, in order to find those spots underneath.
yeah, really with there's a lot of ways to attack cover three. I've listened just in studying the game over the past couple years. A couple quotes really stick out to me about the coverage. Mike Leach, former NFL legendary coach, he pretty much has in his playbook that everything works against cover three. And I noted that in the article because there are a lot of offensive gurus, geniuses that are a lot smarter than I am that love cover three. JT O'Sullivan, another guy that I've learned a lot from, he pretty much says that, if a team wants to come out there and run a lot of cover three against a team that I'm calling the plays for, we're going to throw the ball all over the yard because there's a lot of ways to attack it. Some of the ways that I mentioned, even beyond just the concepts, one-on-ones. So you're going to get one-on-ones on the outside because you got that center fielder in the middle of the field. If you have better players than the opposing team does on the boundary, you're going to have success. You can, really get after them on comebacks, things like that. And then, you can use a play action element. You can use some deep overs to kind of stress the linebackers because you're asking those guys to have the spatial awareness to drop back and run with, if you put your best receiver. The Steelers did this a couple times against the Pats where they put George Pickens as the number 3 on the trip side and then ran him on a deep over. They just weren't able to get him the football for various reasons. But those are some of the ways that you can attack it. Some of the other ways that the Steelers like to is, a Hank concept, which is just mirrored curl flats on both sides. There are, a lot of opinions on that concept in general. Four verts works against everything. So you can pretty much use that against everything. And a lot of teams will If you get what's called like bail coverage, or if you get a cornerback that's, got his back to the sideline, they will, make sure that the outside receivers convert their seam routes or their fly routes to comebacks. And usually you can hit some good plays for first down along the sideline. So you can high-low defenders like every other zone coverage. I mean, there's a lot of ways to beat cover three. It's just, for the Steelers, it's going to come down to execution.
You noted before we turn the lights on for today's show that the Colts give up a lot of catches to running backs on the season. What do you think's behind that, and can the Steelers take advantage of that?
It's really interesting. The Colts linebacking core, they're going through kind of a transition. They obviously just let Darius Leonard go. They've got some other young guys that are getting some playing time. They just signed Ronnie Harrison, who's converted safety. EJ Speed is back in the lineup this week. But they have allowed the fifth most receiving yards to running backs so far this season. If you look at the Bengals game from last week, Chase Brown ripped, I think it was like a 50, 70 yard or something like that off a screen pass, took it to the crib. So there are opportunities to be had just in terms of, being able to move the ball in that manner. Like I said, a lot of the stuff that, the Steelers have put on film, there are answers to cover three. It's just, they may not be the sexiest, but they can work if the execution's good. But, one of the things I keep coming back to is, I always tend to look at things from a quarterback lens, or from a passing game lens. But the Colts do struggle against the run. They're 30th, I think, in rushing success rate. So the Steelers are going to look to run the ball, and when they throw the ball, I think it's going to be equally important to acknowledge that the Colts have what I think is an underrated front. It's not great, but it's above average to solid. They've got some dudes that I really respect. Obviously, DeForest Buckner is kind of the guy that I think everybody knows. But Samson Ebukam, guy that's come over from the Niners, he has gotten better every single year. And, he's put some really strong performances together recently. He had a game-winning strip sack against the Bucs a couple weeks ago. Bucs left tackle Tristan Wirfs, all pro caliber player, and he beat him up pretty well that game. So in terms of, guys, matchups to watch out for Dan Moore. He's going to need to have a pretty good performance, especially if, the Steelers are forced to pass the ball more than they want.
And of course, we know that what they put on tape last week wasn't so good. So the challenge
Right.
will be to make the right decisions for Mitch Trubisky, assuming he is the guy for the entire game, right? It all comes down to the trigger man in that way. Let's go to the other side of the ball. The Steelers defense against what is now the Gardner Minshew III offense of the Indy Colts. He's replaced rookie Anthony Richardson, who suffered a season-ending injury much earlier this season. So it's been mostly the Minshew show, and it's been mostly okay for the Colts. They're kind of middle of the pack in all areas, statistically, yards per play, rush, and pass, but they've found a way to put up the 8th most points in the league per game. So that's pretty interesting. They've made the most, I suppose, of their drives of any kind of consequence. Their top rusher, Jonathan Taylor, is doubtful. So they have some injury woes, as do most teams this time of year, but at some prime skill positions. Do you think this is the week where the Steelers can get that pass rush re-engaged? Because we have not been seeing guys like Highsmith and Watt and the rest. Obviously, they've battled some injuries too. So there are plenty of factors here, but the pass rush just hasn't been what it was to start the season, has it?
Yeah, I think, I mentioned this after the Patriots game before we kind of went through the concussion gate or all that
Yeah.
stuff with Watt over the course of the week. I mentioned that, it just felt like against the Pats, like you were kind of waiting on somebody to make that really big splash play to kind of turn the Pats over or whatever. They get the interception, but, the Pats offensive line has had their struggles this season. It just seemed like Bailey Zappi was really comfortable in the pocket for most of that game. And, in terms of the Colts, they've got some issues, some injuries that have kind of flared up a little bit on the offensive line. They're going to be starting a rookie at right tackle, so that's definitely something to keep an eye on with TJ Watt. But Shane Steichen, to your point, has done an excellent job, kind of piloting this offense, even without their supposed franchise quarterback, the guy that they were really excited about, and Anthony Richardson. And you just look at some of the things that they do. This is a shotgun heavy offense. They like to spread the field out. They will use some tempo. They'll use a lot of play action, even out of shotgun. And then really the thing that sticks out, man, is like the RPOs. So like you think about watching the Eagles, which is where Steichen came from with Jalen Hurts, and all the different RPOs that they would kind of allow and scheme up. They've done the same thing with Minshew. That Miami Dolphins kind of RPO with the glance and the wheel flat combo, they're running the heck out of that. I saw them run it like 3 times in one quarter, I think against the Titans. So it's Steichen has done a good job putting guardrails up for Gardner Minshew in the offense. And what I mean by that is like Minshew has some similarities to Trubisky in that he is very chaotic. I mean, every play, every single outcome is on the table for Minshew. But Steichen's done a good job kind of keeping him in between the lines for the most part. And this offense has been able to run the football really well, even without Jonathan Taylor for the majority part of the season. Zach Moss, who was a guy that I actually quite liked coming out of college, has had a incredible season, in relief. So the Colts, similar to the Steelers, are going to try to run the ball, give the quarterback easy options. But they're going to need a better performance, especially in the first half, than what we saw from the Patriots game.
Colts coming off a loss. They had won 4 in a row. Of course, we know the Steelers coming off maybe the all-time low loss in the Tomlin era. So, both teams figure to be highly motivated. I guess it goes without saying, right? Considering they're both 7-6 and playoff berths are anything but secured at this point with less than a month to play in the regular season. So how you feeling about it? If you had to predict how this game plays out, Steelers on the road as well, it can be a pretty loud crowd at Lucas Oil Stadium too. So you have that factor to contend with on top of everything else.
Yeah, this is in my article this week. I put up that this is kind of a loser leaves town matchup. Like if you just look at the playoff probability from any of the predictors or whatever, the winner of this game is going to be in a decent shape in terms of securing one of those last wild card spots. And then the losers, it's pretty much over. So the Steelers' playoff aspirations, their hopes are really on life support if you don't get this win. And I don't know, man. Say what you want. I'm going to fall into the trap of believing that Mike Tomlin's group is going to be able to kind of rally the troops a little bit, if you will, and come out on top in this one. I think it's going to be ugly per the usual with the Steelers games. But, these teams are fairly evenly matched, I feel like, in terms of talent. But I think that the Steelers have just more dudes on especially on the defensive side of the ball that have the potential to game wreck. And Minshew is a guy that he is usually, I feel like, the type of quarterback that the Steelers take advantage of, just in terms of his chaotic tendencies, some of the turnovers, how, he can try to do a little bit too much. The Steelers kind of feast on that. If you let them, if you give them opportunities to take the football away, normally they will. And that's really when they're at their best, is when, they're causing chaos and everything like that in the backfield. So I think that they'll be able to do just enough with Minshew. Some other matchups I'm really looking forward to watching just from a film perspective. Joey Porter Jr. and Michael Pittman, that'll be a really good matchup. Pittman's been targeted the second most of any NFL receiver, I think, behind, only Tyreek Hill. He's had a really good season. We talk about the contract year thing. Pittman's in a contract year, and he's balling. So he's earned himself a nice payday. And, Porter, obviously, he's had a very, very good rookie season. So I'm really excited to see how that matchup unfolds. But yeah, it's gonna be a testy one. Indianapolis, just a couple hours away from where I am, so wish I was going to see the game live, but it should be a good one, at least to watch at home. Hopefully, the results a little bit better for Steelers fans.
Yeah, and if you're into optimism, out of the 4 teams that aren't the Steelers and Colts, who are tied at 7-6, the Texans, the Broncos, the Bengals, the Bills, 3 of them are playing teams with winning records. So it's not like they have an easy slate here. Only the Texans play a sub 500 team in the Titans this week. So, like you said, if you do win, I don't want to say it locks it up, but boy, is it a big difference. The emotional swings and the playoff probability swings are massive this week, especially, it seems like, with just everyone bunched up the way they are. And we also know for the Steelers, yes, they may not be playing world beaters the next couple of weeks, but they have that matchup at Baltimore at the end. That's going to be tough. You don't want to put it all on that game, even if the Ravens have nothing to play for at that point, which they actually might be in that position considering they're in first place in the entire AFC right now. Only team with 10 wins on that side of the potential playoff bracket. So, all right, you want to predict the final score or anything like that?
Do you know the over/under off the top of your head? I have not had a
I
chance
don't.
to look.
I should have known. Let me search it
I
quickly.
will say this. Like I said, I anticipate it being pretty close. You know,
42 points. 42.
the Colts have been frisky this season. I think if you just look at the some of the things that they've dealt with, again, having to play a backup quarterback for the entirety of the season. Steichen's a guy who I really respect. A lot of Philly elements to that offense, and I think the defense is, like I said, they're well coached. This is not the most talented team in the league, but I do respect kind of how they've been able to, hang around a little bit, if you will. I'll say that the score is going to be something like, we'll say 2017 Steelers. That's what I'll go with. I think it's going to be close, but I think ultimately, I think Minshew is going to make a couple too many mistakes, and the Steelers are going to be able to capitalize off of that. Just need Mitch to play somewhat carelessness, like not as careless.
Yes,
The only
right.
thing I'm worried about.
A little less of that would be great. The Colts are 1.5-point favorites, so Vegas essentially saying the Steelers are slightly better considering this game
Pick 'em.
is in Indy. Like I was saying earlier, 42 is the over under, and I just love Saturday NFL football. It amps things up a little bit because the end of the season is in sight and a lot is on the line. So
Yep.
check out Derrick's work at SteelersNow.com. He is exclusively under the SN Plus tag, so you have to sign up for our premium subscription to access that. It's well worth it. Learn more about football, learn more about what the Steelers are trying to do and what the opponents are trying to do to them on a weekly basis throughout the entire regular season. And we'll see if we get a playoff game or two in 2024. But until then, enjoy the football, and we'll talk to you next week on the Steelers Now pregame scout.